Although it doesn't seem like it, this happened quite a while back, probably over 10 years ago. I was in the later years of high school and home alone. My parents were at a wedding that required them to stay at a hotel, and my brother worked the night shift. At that time, my family lived in a well-known East Coast city, in a blue-collar neighborhood that was starting to take a nosedive. As a teenager, I was a bit of a loner. I wasn't a nerd or anything. I was a big guy, had friends, went on dates, but I was a natural introvert, so I cherished the rare alone time that I got. This weekend, I was looking forward to my usual empty house routine, play some PlayStation on the big screen TV, order a late takeout dinner, pizza or Chinese, and pig out while watching Dragon Ball Z. Then around 2 a.m., I'd fall asleep on the couch with my old dog, Cecil. Cecil was a beagle who was as old as the hills and had been in our family for about 8 years. He was quiet and peaceful, spending most of his time begging for food or sleeping. Cecil never howled or barked. He was perfectly content to rest his head on your lap and stay there all night. It was around 1 a.m. I had just finished the last slice of pizza and was dozing off on the couch when I heard a bang coming from the back alleyway. I didn't think much of it. Cecil's head popped up off my lap, and the hair on his back stood straight up. He was always a bit skittish, so I calmed him down and started dozing off again. Not 2 minutes later, I heard another bang. Cecil did something I had never seen him do before. He leapt off the couch and bolted toward the basement door, barking and growling like a dog twice his size. The look on his face reminded me of a German Shepherd canine unit. I'd never seen him like that before, which instantly got my adrenaline pumping. Through his barking, I could make out a new sound, a steady, persistent banging. There was a seldom used door in the basement that led to our back alleyway. It was old and rusted, hard to open even with a key, and it made a lot of noise. I rushed upstairs to grab the heavy wooden baseball bat I kept under my bed for situations like this. Then I headed back down to the basement. Looking back, I probably should have run or called for help, but I was a macho teenager with a tough guy complex, and honestly, I didn't have anywhere to go. As I made my way down the stairs, Cecil flew past me like a bullet, barking and snarling with the speed and energy of a dog half his age. Then I heard a man's voice say, "Oh fuck," and the banging stopped. I didn't call the cops or anyone else, which was probably the dumbest thing I've ever done. I just sat up for the rest of the night with the bat in my hands, listening for any more sounds. When my brother came home that morning, I told him everything. We went down to the basement to take a look. When we gave the door a tug, the entire thing fell off. This psycho was one good shove away from getting inside, but old Cecil scared him off. I'm pretty sure that lazy, fat old dog saved my life. When I tell this story to people, they usually brush it off, saying the dog was just doing what dogs do. But I tell you, Cecil never barked or moved that fast in his life before. It was like he knew the urgency, like he knew that door was about to give. A few years later, we had to put him down. He just didn't have the will to live anymore. Before the injection, I got a few moments alone with him. I thanked him one last time for his friendship and for what he did that night. By then, I was a grown man with a wife and kids, and I'm convinced none of that would have happened without old Cecil. I was involved in a car accident that caused some minor spinal injuries, mostly swelling that resulted in partial paralysis. I wasn't able to return home afterward because we lived in an apartment on the second floor with no elevator. So I became a resident at a physical therapy rehabilitation center. After finally regaining the ability to walk with the help of a walker and moving around in a wheelchair when needed, it was decided that I'd get my own place using Section 8 housing. After a lot of searching, I found a nice spot, a ground floor condominium in a relatively safe part of town. The one-room condo had a wide living room with an attached kitchenette and a long hallway leading to the bedroom in the back. With my family's help, I got moved in and ready to start living independently for the first time. After a great first meal in my own place, pizza from a local restaurant, I decided to call it a night. As days turned into weeks, I started learning the ins and outs of life in this condo complex. For the most part, everything was fine, except for one thing. There was this skeevy guy who was often seen prowling around. I later learned he was the brother of one of my neighbors. This guy was a perpetually recovering meth addict who would stay with his brother whenever his girlfriend kicked him out of their apartment. My father came by one evening, out of the blue. After a nice dinner, he asked me if I still had my concealed carry permit. I told him I did, but that my gun was still in storage and not yet in my possession. He smiled, reached into his bag, and handed me a housewarming gift, an X-Tac Elite Carry Comp, one of his favorite pieces from his collection. After bidding him farewell, I went to my bedroom, watched a few YouTube videos on my Fire TV, and eventually fell asleep. A few weeks went by, and I mostly forgot about my new toy, having stashed it in the drawer next to my bed. I had to do some grocery shopping, so I called for transportation, a company called Vail that offers free rides for the disabled. I went to the store, bought my groceries for the week, and after the driver helped me bring them inside, I packed everything away and went to bed. Several hours later, I woke up to a noise. It sounded like scratching at my bedroom door. I opened it and saw nothing, but then I heard it again, further down the hallway. I quietly closed the bedroom door and reached into the drawer for my gun, taking it out of the holster and switching the safety off. I positioned myself in my wheelchair and slowly rolled down the hallway toward the kitchen. I got there just in time to hear the door give way. A flashlight beam swept across the interior, scanning the living room, and then I saw the shadowy silhouette of the intruder stepping inside. Needless to say, he was surprised when I flipped on the lights, bathing the room in the harsh fluorescent glow from above. He just stared at me. Then he seemed to remember that he had a knife, and that I was a seemingly helpless guy in a wheelchair. But his eyes went wide like saucers when I pulled the gun from beside me and fired, hitting him center mass. He dropped the knife and stumbled out the door, screaming before collapsing a few feet away. I could hear his labored breathing, probably from a collapsed lung, as I grabbed the phone and called the police. By the time I was on the line with them, other residents had come out of their condos, probably woken up by the shot or the scream. They found the would-be robber sprawled out on the lawn. The police arrived shortly after and began rendering first aid until the paramedics showed up. I gave my statement, and of course, they had to take in my gun as evidence, which I handed over reluctantly. Sometime later, I found out that my late-night visitor was in fact my neighbor's sketchy brother. The police told me he admitted to planning the robbery because, and I quote, "cripples are easy targets." The officer who told me that smiled slightly and said, "Well, looks like he chose the wrong cripple." As for the brother and his girlfriend, they were encouraged to move out not long after. I was more than happy to see them go. A much better tenant moved in soon after. As for the addict, he survived. Last I heard, he's in prison, serving a 5-year sentence for armed robbery in the first degree. A few years ago, I was renting a house in Northern California. The neighborhood was just outside the suburbs. It seemed like the perfect balance of having space and having nice neighbors close enough not to feel isolated. The area had no streetlights, so it got very dark at night, especially if there were clouds blocking the moonlight. It didn't bother me though. It made my little house feel even more quaint on dark nights. I got home from work one day in midwinter. It was a cloudy night. I saw only what my headlights and front porch light illuminated. When I got out of my car, I caught a whiff of cigarette smoke. I didn't see anyone nearby, so I ignored it and went inside. I had just gotten off a shift with a few hours of overtime, so I felt pretty tired. Even though it wasn't 7 yet, I decided to take a shower and call it a night. I woke up sometime later, sure that I had heard a noise inside my house. My friend would sometimes stop by to use my shower after work on his way to night classes. I had even given him a spare key so he could stop by even if I wasn't home. He would always text me beforehand though, and I hadn't heard my phone go off. I reached over to my bedside table and picked up my cell phone. These were the days before phones had light sensors that would dim the screen in the dark, and this particular phone was so bright I could use it as a flashlight. Through squinted eyes, I could make out that it was 9-something, but I couldn't tell if I had an unread text or not. I set my phone down and called out my friend's name. There were a couple of seconds of silence before I heard loud footfalls as someone started running through the bottom floor of my house. I leapt out of my bed and ran to the closet. They were already up the stairs by the time I had opened the door and stepped inside. That house had 3 rooms upstairs, 2 bedrooms on either side of the hallway. The one I was in, a spare, and a bathroom at the end. The bedroom doors were both closed, but the bathroom door was cracked open. I heard whoever was in my house thunder down the hallway past my door and into the bathroom. That gave me just enough time to open the attic access in the ceiling of my closet and hoist myself up. I had just started to lift myself up when the person ran back out of the bathroom. My feet were barely inside the attic when my bedroom door burst open. I heard footsteps run into my room and stop. When they didn't see me in that room, they ran back to the hallway and into the other room, which just had boxes stacked in a corner, some weights, and a table where I painted my miniature models. I guess they decided that if someone were hiding, it would be in the bedroom, because they charged back into my room and turned on the light. The closet door was ripped open. I was crouched in my attic just a foot or so away from the access, ready to stop them if they tried to climb up. All I could see was from about their knees down. They were wearing dirty blue jeans with frayed cuffs and worn work boots. After a few seconds of looking in the closet, they stepped away. I heard a loud crash from my room, followed by a scream of frustration and anger. The man in my house ran back down the stairs. I heard crashes and clatters as things were thrown around and furniture was knocked over. I had left my phone when I ran for the closet, and I wasn't certain I could climb down without him hearing. After some time, the noises stopped. I decided it was safe enough to climb down and call the police. The first thing I noticed when I exited the closet was that the intruder had flipped my bed over, I assume in an attempt to find me. That must have been the loud noise I'd heard after he stepped away from the closet. I couldn't find my cell phone, so I went to the landline by the bed and called the police. The first floor was a mess, but I had expected that. Chairs had been knocked over, the sofa flipped. All the books, pictures, and knickknacks I had on my shelves were strewn across the floor. The cupboards in the kitchen had been opened, and all the boxed and canned foods had been thrown to the ground. As far as I could tell, though, the only thing missing was a single knife from the wooden block in my kitchen. The police checked the house from top to bottom. They found that the side door had been forced open with something like a crowbar. They also found a few cigarette butts along my fence line, along with some foil and an empty pen tube, which the police said people often use to smoke meth. They believe he'd been watching my house for some time. I realized he must have been out there smoking when I got home. They collected the evidence and told me I should stay with family or friends that night and get the door fixed as soon as possible. I opted not to sleep. I moved a shelf over to block the broken door and spent the next couple of hours cleaning things up. Every so often, I'd go to the window with a flashlight and shine it along the fence line where the police had found the cigarette butts and foil, but I didn't see anything. The next day, I called to have the door fixed and motion lights installed at the back and sides of the house. I ran a phone cable up into the attic and added a landline. I never wanted to be stuck up there without a phone again. Nothing else happened at that house. I lived there another 3 years without incident. One more precaution I took was practicing getting out of bed, going to my closet, and climbing into the attic as quickly and quietly as possible. I even kept doing it when I moved, except now I go into a crawl space at the back of the closet instead of the attic. I try not to think about what would have happened if I had just been a bit slower getting up there, or if he hadn't gone into the bathroom at the end of the hall first.